If you can believe it, ladies and gentlemen, we are almost through the cast over backlog. I am going all the way back to the beginning of May. May 5th, in fact. It's going to be TopRamen taking on 3Crow in this 3-game set. That's 3. We're going to be starting off on Sideshow, and this is, of course, 3Crow in the top left as the Protoss player, with TopRamen practicing Zerg in the bottom right. Pretty cool stuff, if you don't mind me saying so. Obviously, this is going to be interesting. I've never seen TopRamen play Zerg before. Apparently he's... Well, that's not true. I did see him play against Smarty Cakes in like a ridiculous match on Excelsior, which is like a really old 3-spawn map that I made a long time ago that was sort of like a pseudo FFA map, but also not... It was just a total... let's just say it was utter chaos. Despite that, though, we will have pretty interesting plays, I'm sure. This is obviously from way back, so I don't expect to see any of the usual meta stuff. I don't expect to see anything that is immediately recognizable to the competitive scene and sphere that we have put together. But that might just make it more interesting. I think I'll splice in a couple of these sorts of games, maybe once or twice per week. Obviously, earlier in the week, I did that Martino Force versus Comical Flop set, and it was very different than what we normally see, right? We normally see players who are a lot more... I guess you could say interested or invested, have a lot more time spent in the game, and they maybe are playing at a higher level as well. So I was able to check them out and see what was going on at the lower level, so to speak. And I don't really think that way about TopRamen to the same degree, but he's playing as his off race, so there's that. And 3Crow has also been a little bit out of practice lately, mostly because he hasn't played that much. But this is going back to when I think he was a little bit more active, so maybe we'll see some interesting stuff out of him. He's obviously going double lattice behind this very aggressive scribe harassment. He's down to 13 hits, though. That means that he'll only survive a scant few Droleth pukes, so he will have to evade and evacuate. So back home he goes, seeing that it is a hatcheted pool. So yeah, this is way before Krankendow showed up with the Larvosk and stuff, so yeah, don't expect to see that as the opener in any of the games, assuming TopRamen does play Zerg all of the games. It's kind of interesting, right? Because Ramen and Aoud and Hit 'em Up. These guys are like the grinders, right? We got Ecalypso and Krankendow you can throw in there too. It's like there's this cadre of relatively new players who've only been here for max a month, maybe 2 in the case of like TopRamen. I think he was, I think him and Ecalypso have been here for a little bit longer, right? And so it's like, damn, okay, these guys are coming in here and they're playing well and they're grinding out and they're playing a bunch of matches. Like, that's really cool to me because we didn't know who these people were before, you know, say a couple months ago, right? Or a month ago in some cases. Like Krankendow, I think, showed up at the beginning of this month. I could be wrong on the exact timeline, but I'm pretty sure that's about it. And it's really cool to see how fast people go for that sort of thing. Now, this is funny. So in Cosmonarchy, you reveal burrowed units by standing on top of them. That's one of the ways you can reveal. You can also build detection, obviously. But that worker comes in, sees 3 lattice, and burrows, and then the Vassals are air units. They can't stand on top of your stuff, right? So it is going to be mass Vassal play. We have a potential expansion coming for Ramen, but I think instead he's going to be... he's going to want to build some Spraiths. You want, like, 2 Spraiths in your main, 1 sort of behind or underneath the Hatcherosk, and 1 maybe over here or something like that, like maybe right below the ridge. We'll see where Ramen is thinking about placing his. Obviously, down here you're going to need 2. And then, you know, at some point, once you hit a certain number of Vassals, you do have to start watching out for that, right? So Ramen is being very bold by not building any Spraiths, not building any Kagrants at all, nothing happening for defense, and he's not even building any additional Quas. So even if it comes to shove, like, he scouted 3 Lattice and Mass Vassal. We're already approaching 12 Vassals, by the way. Like, this is not a small number of commitment from air. We could very easily see 3Crow just walk into him and slap him down. So, you know, maybe this is the kind of game that Ramen was hoping didn't get cast ever. He's like, oh, great, I'm free. I don't have to worry about the Mass Vassal embarrassment. I can just sort of, you know, it was lost to the annals of time. Well, how wrong he was. Now, despite that, obviously Ramen still has a little bit of scouting potential. He's not actually dead in this situation. I just struggle to see how he's going to defend. I mean, he has gone for the Hydrith Den, but he's not going to be able to go for Skither Cores, which are sort of like the air-based counter to Vassals, especially Mass Vassals. He's not going to be able to build that many Bactylisks either, because he needs to upgrade his Hydrothen for that. And Vassals kind of, in enough number, will deal with that too, so it's not even really like a foolproof way of deleting that. And 3Crow's just happily building more and more Vassals off of one base, right? And so this is 19 of them. He is producing additional ones. He's got some idols at home for any Quaz-based counterattack, right? We finally have a single Spraith in each base coming down, but I don't know if it's going to finish in time. We'll see how on the ball TopRamen is for this. This is coming very late. Okay, so he is going to go ahead and almost immediately do that. The Vassals will initially take a fight versus the Quaz, it looks like. No, they are going to go ahead and avoid initial detection. But this is enough Vassals that they will just kill a single Spraith, right? So this is not nearly enough for what Ramen needs. And I would not be surprised if the Vassals simply ignore the Spraith as well. But no, it looks like they are just going to go ahead and kill it. You can see only one of them going down so far. Now we've got another one. There's a transfer instead of a burrow, which is pretty important, actually, because it means that Ramen will still be harvesting to some degree. And he's going to go ahead and remorph some of his defenses at the natural, which is obviously the next logical conclusion for where these Vassals end up going. A little bit of miss micro there. Definitely could have spent a little bit more effort cleaning up additional workers. And actually right now Ramen still has the worker advantage. He is going to go ahead and transfer back to his main. So a little bit of harassment, but honestly it's not nearly as deadly as I expected it to be. I don't know if 3Crow maybe spent a little bit too much time trying to wail on this hatch. He still has no extra base. He's got 6 more Vassals leaving his house and dropping the Nexus in the natural as well. So he will eventually be able to catch up in base count, but it's going to take a little bit of focus from him. He still has not actually looked over at it. Instead he's figuring out where his Vassals are actually going to be. Yeah, if he delays this Nexus, okay, now he's going to go ahead and put it down, but it was pretty late, so I was a little bit worried about that. Shout out to June 3 Hong for having the gall to make not just a wireframe for the Ridge. He's made wireframes for everything. Group wireframes as well for group selecting, since we have multi-building select in this. I don't know, dude. Something about selecting the Ridge and seeing that was pretty cool. All right, he's coming back in for an attempted snipe on the Hacharosk, and this is forcing all of Ramen's forces back, even though I think that force could absolutely crack this position. So, you know, again, not really building that many Spraiths. He got caught with his pants down now twice. And yeah, TopRamen is now just going to go ahead and leave the building. He will commit to the attack. A little bit indecisive. But he does have 3 Spraiths over here, which are going to be a little bit difficult for the Vassals to deal with. Now, it's still 20 of them. Wisely building an extra one over here. The pool, not exactly the primary target at this point, but it looks like maybe that will still be enough. Executing that last worker that dared to attempt to come back in. And now the cliff-advantaged idols are wailing on all of these forces. Ramen needs to micro in down here and attack the Nexus to cancel it. Otherwise, he's just going to end up hemorrhaging all of his units. You know, like, that's not exactly the best way of approaching that. Looks like now he's got too few units to actually attack, and so the idols will clean up his attack force. Yeah, that feels pretty rough. Now he's sort of cordoned off into his natural. He still has the worker advantage, but his opponent has the Nexus finished up and ready to go. Some Burrowed Hydra and Quaz tag team duo over there, and an attempted take at 9 o'clock. The Hydrothen still stands. We did have more Hydras being made, but I don't know where they are at. It looks like these 3 are here. I guess the other ones must have died already. I don't see their corpses over here, so I'm not quite sure. Oh, there's one of them down there. Yeah, it looks like this, while the Hydrothen is being attacked, he's going to get as many free picks as he can. He's basically lost this for sure. We got some more Vassal action over here. The idols now marching across the map. We do have a single Circuit. The Hydrothen does end up going down. Not very many of them got queued up because there's only the 1 hatch production. And now the idols are going to go ahead and destroy that Ovoleth. Now, because that Ovoleth took up so many shots, we actually do have a dead idol and, you know, maybe some minimal stuff there. But now he's going to call GG. He can't stand up to those idols. You can see there the Circuit dying pretty quickly, and we'll fast forward until 3Crow actually leaves the game, because sometimes he likes to destroy his enemy structures. And there you go. All right, 3Crow on the board. It's worth noting, I don't favor him, but this is also before I knew that it was going to be Zerg. I assumed it was actually going to be Protoss versus Terran setup. But cool, we get to see some Zerg. Let's move on to game number 2 and see if it's just as silly. All right, we're going to Titan Forge for match number 2. It is TopRamen in the bottom left as the Zerg player. Chip on his shoulder wants to slap 3Crow back after all those air units. Learning the hard way that when you're up against so many Vassals, you do need more than just 1 Spraith. Like I said, as soon as you scout triple lattice and it's all Vassal production, you need 2 Spraiths per base. I know it sounds like it's a lot of investment, but since he was going for fast Hydrith anyway, 4 workers that early on the downside is, okay, what if he's like mind gaming me and then he just storms the front with a bunch of golems and lattice units that are ground based as opposed to the air based army, right? The vassal. And the answer to that is that's why you scout, right? And so like maybe it's actually worth just putting down one per base and waiting and scouting. But he had the Zeths out, and he could have maybe moved forward to scout the vassal count growing largely. Like if you see it increasing to like 8 and then 12, you know, okay, this guy's actually using all 3 of his lattices for vassal production, right? Maybe there's one idle at that time, you know? It's interesting. Now, this map is by the Shambler. It is a map that is no longer in the active duty map pool, if you want to borrow that term from Counter-Strike, the Empire class map pool that has actually seen a lot of inclusions lately. Not sure which ones we'll end up using for the next set of tourneys. Definitely end up... I'm interested in seeing if we can add some more later on. Oh, I like that little tickle from across the little diagonal position here. Look at that! Look at what 3Crust doing. He's pretending he's some kind of Gosu pro, denying worker mining and stopping his enemy from doing that. Well, now he's got it. He can mine from the gas, and then... You know what you could do is... You could mine from the gas, mine from the mineral, mine from the gas, mine from the mineral, just do that over and over again, and you're helping him deplete his main faster. Can you believe that? Dude, nobody would ever think that. But it is it's not a real strategy. You can see he's got idle workers over here, and he's not building out of his lattice. So he could have been doing a little bit better, but he's already lost his worker back here. So hey, a little bit less harassment. 3 lattice started immediately. Ramen will now know a little bit more about what's going on, and actually just attacking the pylon here. Why not? Maybe you'll force your opponent to get a little nervous. You know, he did scout the pool coming. Could be Zeth follow-up and try to snipe the pylon down, and then suddenly you've only got 1 vassal out, right? So it's not actually happening, but it could be. There's a lot of people who think... I remember when Mesk was still around, he was the one who said, like, dude, I swear to God, just bring 2 Masons and attack the pylon. And depower the structure. It's not a bad idea, honestly. But it's also really funny, and if it doesn't work, you're a goober. So... I don't think Terran specifically can follow it up with anything. Maybe if they go, like, Bio, or like a forward stockade or something, right? I could see that working versus Protoss. You bring 2 Masons. I guess you bring 3 Masons, because you got to build the stockade, and then you got to attack the pylon with 2 workers while the stockade is opening up. Maybe you attack it with 1 worker just as your scout or whatever, and you like, you know, maybe they like send 1 scribe to try to counter harass, and you just kind of dance around and take it a little bit, but then your second worker arrives, and he repairs the first guy while he keeps punching down the pylon, and then the 3rd worker arrives with a Maverick in tow, and you're like, oh shit! Anyway, I got myself really hyped up for that, but there's no Terran in this game, so we'll never see that strategy, unfortunately. And by never, I mean, well, if somebody does that, send me the replay. Especially if it is a close game. That way there's enough ambiguity, right? So Ramen scouted out, sees no expansion coming, has his Kagrant in the natural. Nice spot there for it. Kind of covers everything, right? Like maybe over here you could attack the Quas pool and maybe the gas miners for the ridge or something, but you know, that's what the second guy is for, and that's obviously what the Quases are for themselves. It is Mass Vassal again. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. It isn't broke in the sense of balance. It's definitely not OP. There's plenty of strategies you can do to counter this. And we'll see if Ramen has that strategy, that strategic mind being deployed. Some of the old homies who have been around for a while will know of a very dastardly campaign project called Flame Knives from way back that I played. And they have some very funny quotables from the unit responses. Like, it's one of those it's so bad it's good kind of things. Not when you're playing it, but in retrospect, I think in my memory banks, it has aged very nicely. Because I just remember, like, listening to really stupid characters, right? Like, I mean, there was no voice acting for the dialogue, but you would get these dialogue bits from when you're ordering the units around, the unit quotes, right? Unit responses, as we call them internally. And those unit responses would be stuff like, "My genius mind prevails." But it's like fucked up with really bad voice editing and stuff. And all I can think of is that playing when you outsmart your enemy by building 30 Spraiths or something. It looks like it will only be 4, which is honestly, this is fine. Like, I know this seems excessive as fuck, and maybe the placement could be a little bit better, but honestly, this is straight up fine. Like, I don't have any problems with this. And you know what? Something else that's occurring to me as far as I'm talking about, like, random stuff that's popping into my brain right now is that we have, like, if I showed you this screenshot, and then said, like, this is fine as the caption, which would be obviously a meme format thing. If I showed you that, the one thing that, if that was the thumbnail, that would spoil is the fact that you'd see the first game and you'd see, oh, well, this is the screen, the thumbnail was on a different game, so I already know he does that. You know what I mean? And that's kind of like, I wonder about that, right? Because all of the Artosis Casts videos that I'm watching, all of the other game videos that I watch from like Saiyan and stuff, a lot of the thumbnails will be of the game one thing, even if that's not where the most interesting action happens, or that's not where the funnest strategy thing is, right? That's not where the most enjoyable bit is from. Because, like, you almost don't want to do that, I guess. You don't want to spoil that, per se. But, you know, maybe what we could do is we could find a thing, like what happened in the Neblime game set between him and Jack. I don't think the Kabbalist game was the first game in that set. It might have been. But even if it wasn't, like, that's fine, because you know that there's going to be, like, a bunch of games in that set, in that video, and we're going to cast them all. And that, like, at one point in the future, in some game, they're all in the same map anyway. So at some point, you see that. Now, okay, here we go. We've got 2 Spraits over here, and they are coming in. Oh, there's a third one in the back. Nice burrow as well. So that is going to be a bit of a problem, as there are going to be a bunch of hemorrhaged Vassals here. We have lost a couple of them over here. The Hydras and Quasis now engaging. We've got a Circuit in the front. Oop, I paused the game by accident. And we have plenty of Spraits here still trying to mutate. Down to 24, so he's lost about 12. By the way, Spraith is going to finish and get a couple of hits and obviously delay more. And that does mean that he's down to 22. Okay, so what's the reaction now? Surely you don't think, oh, I'm just going to sit here and do nothing. No, you're going to make Hydras and Quasis. I wouldn't have minded if this was a Spraith, by the way. Like, I understand the idea that, like, oh shit, I got to watch out. But honestly, did he kill any workers? He killed a worker over to the side that was going for the extra base. He killed the workers that turned into the Kagrants. And he denied some mining time, admittedly a lot more than I think Mr. Ramen was expecting, because he still hasn't remorphed them or told them to go back to mining. There we go. Okay. He's going to go ahead and remake those defenses. There's obviously way more on this side as far as anti-air. So the main is much better defended. And yeah, you can see it's an evisceration. The Vassals are not doing nearly as much. And these Zets have been watching, and they know there's not a single extra base coming. He's going to go ahead and cancel this Kagrant, or destroy it, rather. This Spraith is halfway done. Now sniping a couple of workers. Good burrows. Every time 3 Crow stops to attack, yeah, sure, the unit control could be a little bit better on his side, but he is taking damage, and he is hemorrhaging some units for sure. Now, there are a couple of burrowed ones, it looks like, or just the one burrowed one by the mineral field. Pretty hard to notice that in the heat of battle. So I wouldn't be surprised if that one goes by the wayside. So we can pretend that that worker was killed. So that means that, you know, 4 workers died so far that were actively mining. And he's, you know, killed a couple of Kagrants as well. Now we have TopRamen going to go ahead and take his third base. The Scribe is over here. This is one thing I think Ramen could do a little bit better on, is try to, like, unburrow those Zeths and, like, you know, as soon as the Vassals arrive, basically unburrow the Zeths, move them back over here. We do have Mass Golem with the remaining Vassals, and there is a transition into Ecclesiasts from the Gateways. So we should still see 3 Crow have a defensive army, but he absolutely cannot attack. And the Hydras, remember, these are old Hydras with 2 armor pens, so they absolutely slay even versus the Golems. They just crush. So you really got to watch out for that, and I feel like at this stage, 3 Crow's probably going to realize, oh my god, I'm behind. I didn't kill him that many workers. I didn't stop his third base for that long. You know, this thing and that thing, right? In fact, if TopRamen had been able to get this hatch off, and that's what the Vassals were preoccupied with, that would have bought so much time, and the Vassals would have done even less. Because you want to cancel the third base, but you also want to stop your opponent from building, you know, 4 Spraits in each base. And that was coming up, right? It was 3 Spraits in this base. You know, the third one finished during the attack, and that sort of thing, right? So the Golems and the Ecclesiasts make themselves known at this point. Well, maybe the Ecclesiasts haven't, actually. But at this point, you know, Ramen can be fairly confident in the idea that, okay, my opponent is definitely going for a ground-based army now and has taken his natural. So the third base coming up at the same time as the natural is actually a pretty big deal in favor of the Zerg. Normally, that is not the timing that you see. I know people are used to this sort of thing from Starcraft 1, but in Cosmonarchy it scales up a little bit differently. And usually Zerg are the ones that are faster to take their 4ths and 5ths, but not necessarily their 3rds. And sometimes not even their naturals, which sounds a little cursed to some people. But eventually you get back into that swing of like, okay, yeah, Zerg are up like 1 or 2 bases in general at the higher levels that we've seen over Protoss. And Protoss are a little bit slower to scale up in the mid-game at that point for their economy. especially when they don't have an embassy. The embassy, which is the Forge graphic, trains additional workers. In addition to the building more scribes, which is the probe, right? It builds more scribes, but it also gives you access to the witness, which is the observer, the envoy, which is the shuttle, and a new unit called the artisan, which actually harvests resources remotely and doesn't need a town center. It just returns that automatically. So it's like a global worker in some ways. We're already seeing Ramen attempt to take a 4th base. He's got so many sprites, 5 sprites active in the main. There hasn't been that many vassals made. Like, he's got less vassals than he used to. He came in with like 34-ish, 36 maybe. So, pretty good number. And as he came in at the same time, yeah, sure, he's got this ground force, but it's not going to stand up to the Hydras and the circuits, right? So the one thing you can maybe say about Ramen's position is that he could maybe have his Hydras on the high ground, or he could like try to... well, he's actually just going to go ahead and try to engage. Now, as the Vassals are clumping up over here, they're just going to see more and more sprites. And yeah, some Hydras on the high ground over here. And the Golems are basically dead before the Vassals even show up to fight. Now the Vassals are in the battle. Maybe we can see a little bit more of a competitive force because the Golems didn't even get within attack range of the circuits. That's how one-sided that fight was. So yeah, you can see the Hydras definitely paying off here. And 3Crow just behind economically, behind tempo-wise, definitely behind in terms of worker count. He has scaled up his worker count a little bit, but he's still undersaturated for 2 bases. He's actually only barely saturated in the main. So, slightly undersaturated, I guess would be the way to put that. Now, Ramen is going to go ahead and take this pressure and run with it. There are no static defenses. He can unburrow these Zets at any time to join in the fight as soon as he remembers they exist, basically. Not that they're going to make a huge difference, but, there is that. Now we've got some static defense warping in, but these are 35-second long production time for those structures. So good luck getting them in. Basically, Ramen just needs to A-move in the next half a minute, and he basically wipes the floor with 3Crow, taking his 4th base, mildly saturating his 3rd. Still could use a couple additional workers there. Iral Iris halfway done, so he's on his route to tier 2. And 3Crow really hasn't been able to build anything, right? He hasn't made any idols. He hasn't really made much of anything else. He's got his Vassals sharking forward. He's got 27 of them stacked up there, making some Zealots. These Wardens are going to get stopped before they can really do anything. And yeah, his only hope is indeed the Vassal count, which, you know what? Because 22 Hydras weren't in this fight, it looks like, oh yeah, 3Crow can totally hold. The problem is that there's almost as many Hydras as there are Vassals, and there is no way to win from this position. So yeah, 3Crow is going to end up facing reality momentarily. Not that he doesn't know how many Hydras there actually are, so it's not like he's been sitting in here for too long or whatever, but he's definitely no longer favored. His main is broken, or his main entryway is broken. On Titan Forge, that's very bad. And the Zets are attacking his workers. Now the Vassals can no longer trade. You got 14 of them and way more Hydras. Even still a single Quasilisk for good measure. Love that. And yeah, the worker count plummeting. The Nexus is going to go down. So, 3Crow likes his last stands. He'll make it look scenic and heroic, even though he's inside a Terran facility. An infested Terran facility, clearly. Just think about, 3Crow himself has been the guy who has done the Trenches campaign, which he takes, maps made by the community, and he repurposes them for, what do you call it? For, the campaign that he made. Just imagine, what kind of story would he tell in Titan Forge, exactly? Has this been an infested facility full of dark horrors? I think so. This is Mutat Spire halfway done, dude. That's very terrifying. But the Hydra count is not compromising. GG is called, and Ramen will take game number 2, which means this best of 3 is a legit one. It has an actual decider match. I hope you guys are excited to move on into our final game. I told you we'd see Germination again. It's 3Crow in the top left, and it's TopRamen in the bottom right. That's right, there is no top right spawn for this. In fact, has there been a top right spawn? No, none of these maps have had top right spawns. So TopRamen can never spawn in the top right, man. I hope you guys are enjoying Cosmonarchy. It is a pretty cool time. We have all sorts of new units, new structures, new tactics, new mechanics, and just a new vision, really, for the real-time strategy genre. We're deploying it in this project. We've got lots of exciting plans, including the development of the 4th race, the Escozi. And, it's funny, I was just musing on how, it's an imaginary goal, technically possible, but not something that we're super aggressively pushing for right now, and not something that I ever expect. But if we were to get to a significant amount of cash flow from our coffee page, which is, of course, linked in the bottom right and in the description, and if we were to get to a point where we were making enough money per month to essentially pay my bills per week after the 50% split goes, because half of it goes to Veek, of course. Veek7, my brother in Caw, my homie, my chromie. He's obviously helping out quite a bit with the programming side, so he certainly deserves his cut. And all I can say is, imagine a world where that was the case, though, and I could actually work on Cosmonarchy for my gainful employment, pay the bills via Cosmonarchy. That would be pretty sick. And I was musing on how, like, since people were talking about, like, oh, you should do this and you should do that, and, you know, you should spend time on the factions, and you should spend time on, you know, the XYZ thing that I like. And, dude, I love everything, all of the ideas, all of the options. There's not a single aspect of Cosmonarchy that I don't enjoy working on. Like if it's sourcing new graphics or modeling them myself or doing, you know, learning the Blender stuff, obviously doing the voice acting and unit response scripting, getting other people to do the voice acting where they're available and stuff. Like going through that whole rigmarole, like literally every facet of it. That was just like the audiovisual side. But, you know, I love the balancing. I love the melee map making. I love the campaign design. I love all of that stuff. And yet, there's only so many hours in the day, and many of those hours do have to be dedicated to gainful employment, because that's just the world we live in, right? And so if we lived in a different world, where we were getting ridiculous amounts of money through that coffee per month, and it was stable, and it was like that for like 3 months in a row, and it showed no sign of changing, then suddenly I'd be like, huh, well, I guess I can put in my letter of resignation, or, you know, like reduce my hours to like once per week or something, just so I had like basically getting paid to work out at that point, right? That's basically what my job would be. And so, like, you know, that might be something I would consider, and then I would really be able to just turn the crank, so to speak. So if you guys ever hear about crank mode from Jonathan Blow's programming streams and game design streams, it's pretty cool. Crank mode is basically he ignores chat for like 30 minutes and just cranks, sometimes longer. And you know what? That's the kind of shit you'd see basically all the time, except I probably wouldn't ignore chat. I love chat. In fact, I want to go back to trying doing some of these castovers live. We put the chat on the screen and everything. But anyway, let me know if you'd be interested in something like that. Maybe we can make that work. Drop a comment. You know how it goes. Drop a like. Thumbs up this video. Dude, isn't that like the same thing as giving me money? Oh, wait, it isn't. But you can do that too. Oh, he's so good at this. By the way, while I've been blabbing about stuff and you know, sort of musing on what could be if we found some Oilers and they were sending us in the mad money. We do have a bunch of Vassals again. We do have triple lattice opener on one base, and that Avaleth will scout it yet again. I didn't comment on this, but the Avaleth did get absolutely annihilated by the Vassals in the second game. That just kind of confirms for TopRamen what he's up against, right? 3-card not want to change it. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, and if it does break, don't try to fix it, just do it again. See if it works. Maybe he thinks that the reason why it didn't work out last time was unrelated to anything else. Now, when you detect structures, you can actually see what they're building and what the progress bar is. So I don't know if Ramen used that particular logic there, but he would have seen that more Vassals were coming out. It wasn't like he was about to pivot into idols or something. And obviously, when you see that, you see triple lattice. You've seen this a couple of times. So go ahead, put down your Spraiths. You know, get your anti-air defenses in order. He was already preparing it because the first Vassal already showed itself. But, you know, it's good to scout because at that point you're like, okay, I do have to worry a little bit about this. Like, what if he's just scouting and then based on my opener or based on his game plan anyway, he's going to only make the one Vassal and then go for, like, mass ground, right? Like, at this point, people haven't realized it, but Golem Idol is really good. Golem Ecclesiast, really good. All that stuff, very, very strong. And so 3-card not exactly demonstrating that in this moment, but still something worth pointing out that, yeah, absolutely. It's one of those things where you got to think to yourself, God damn, dude, you know, like, is he really going to try the mass Vassal thing over and over again? Or is he going to be pivoting into something else? And was it only one lattice, right? You know, my worker scout didn't see as many as before or whatever. So anyway, all this is going through Ramen's mind. He does his due diligence. He scouts with the Avaleth, even though it's a suicide mission. And it does pain to, you know, lose that much Vespene investment in the early game. It's still definitely worth it because then you can just prepare. And so already he's got 2 Spraiths in the main. He's got plenty of Hydra Quasi. He's building a Spraith in the natural. That is going to get overwhelmed. And he's been through the ringer at this point. So he knows that when it's like 20 or almost 30 Vassals in this particular case, that he can't really sustain himself on that one single Spraith alone. I'm going to be massing up by the natural here. And he's only got 2 Spraiths in the main, so this is a little worrisome. But he does have this very well-placed Quasilisk where he is going to be aware that, okay, you're coming in, let me scramble to respond to that. Now, more Hydras are hatching. He's going to go after the Hydra then immediately. This is eventually going to get zoned away. He can't stand and fight this as much as he would like to. So that's 2 going down for not really that much gain. He's killed a single Quasilisk and damaged the Hydra then. Now, you can see how much damage he actually did do there. But if he decided to commit to killing that, it's not a guarantee that it falls, but I think it's pretty likely that it does. We do have a bunch of golems just got made. I thought maybe he would put down a Nexus, but nope. Wants to make those mass golems. Another hatch happening in the main. Again, this is before the Larvos. Nobody really knew about the Larvos. Jack was making them a little bit, but that was it. And now look at this. He's going to go ahead and snipe the Hydra this time around, and he will be successful because Ramen's forces were admittedly quite out of position here. So he's going to go after some worker kills here. He's only got 1 so far. He turned to attack 1, but okay, now getting a second, a third, a fourth, a fifth. We'll just keep on counting like it's Sesame Street. And so, yeah, he's actually only up to 8 kills right now. I say only because, you know, there's basically that many. Yeah, there's 8 more workers right there ready to go. So it's almost like he did no damage. Now, obviously, he did do some damage, but now he's down very, very low in terms of the vassal count, going down from, you know, you factor in some reinforcements there, but going down from 27 to 18, you know, so has been divided by 3 and handed the 2. You know what I mean? Maybe you don't, but it's pretty good. There was a really funny moment in one of the invitationals where Neblan was with me, and I said something absolutely unfucking parsable. And he was just, I was like, you know what I mean? So the Hydra then going to go ahead and get sniped here again. Kagran first. Now, this actually might end up him attacking the Kagran there, but when I wasn't actually making anything. This has not really been very cost efficient, right? Like, at some point you have to realize that your opponent is just building more workers than you because they've got 4 hatch production. They've got you know, a natural up already that you've scouted and attacked. You've got no natural, and you're well away from being able to do that. So I'm definitely taking Ramen's position here. He took the 1 game on Sideshow, and it was like, okay, all right, I guess I have to respect that a little bit more than I was. And now, you know, he's lost, I think, a combined 10 workers when you factor in the structures that were destroyed, the Hydrith and the Kagran. So that's it. And it sounds like, oh, that's a lot of workers, but when your opponent isn't making a natural, when your opponent isn't making an embassy to build additional workers faster that way, yeah, they are going to be behind despite all of their damage. They actually need to get more damage dealt. Like, maybe like, I want to say they might have needed to kill, like, he might have actually needed to kill 30 workers here. So he's going up to 15, 16, 17, 18. He should be able to get a couple more, but I don't think it's nearly enough, man. Like, yeah, he's going to get to 20. Excuse me. And that's it. He's capped out at 20. He's got 3 vassals left. Not going to be able to make too much more. That last attack did get something like 10 workers. So in theory, that was a lot more fruitful. But he loses all of his vassals. Got to remake them. Decides to remake them. He thinks that that's worthwhile. And he's allowed his Zerg opponent to get up to a 3rd base. You know, 5 hatch production now. And plenty of additional power coming out as a result of that. So, yeah, I think TopRamen is just going to run away with this game. Yeah, there's a 4th lattice coming. You're making the Ecclesiasts, but you're on 1 base. You're on a very, very low worker count. Way less Vespene income, and obviously markedly less mineral income as well. And your forces aren't even in the position to use the cliff advantage here. So the focus fire coming out of the golems, well, they're not focusing, which is kind of a problem right now. So maybe Ramen will give him a little bit of a way back into the game. But right-clicking the golem will bypass its passive. That's my favorite thing to say. Iris is starting, so I guess Ramen is going to make a little bit of a longer game out of this one by going to tier 2 and not just going to A-move him and you know, do some right-clicking on the golems. I feel like he was in position to trade down the military, which almost always favors Zerg, and especially now with... That would make 3 Crows super vulnerable, and he would never think about attacking. If his military got traded down, and he was only with the vassals, and like had maybe 2 idols left over or whatever, no. He's not going to do that. So, some circuits being assembled over here by the ramp, and up here we'll probably see a 6th hatch at some point. Iris more than halfway complete. More Zets, a lot of Hydras out here. You can see, just he doesn't even need to right-click them this time around. Let's see if 3 Crow can make some good damage happen, because there wasn't really that much in the way of military focus coming out of the Zerg player here. And so actually the golems are getting a lot more mileage than they should, because again, there is no right-clicking happening. So back over here, Ramen's busy just building more stuff, making more units. He will end up conceding this hatch. He doesn't really even need to cancel it per se. He's just trying to buy as much time as possible. And so I don't actually know if it's going to be enough here. The Vassal count is not that high. A lot of them did end up dying over there. 15 of them is not actually that much at the grand scheme of things. And where are the Hydras, right? The Hydra count needs to be higher. Ramen is going to get progressively more and more endangered as the game goes on, as this push gets deeper and deeper into his territory, because they're, you know, his Protoss units are going to be on top of the production here. But again, his opponent still doesn't even have a natural. So 3Crow still doesn't have a natural. He can lose the third base and still be ahead in workers and in economy by a considerable degree. So we'll see if Ramen recognizes that. He does have the ability to take these Zets and run them in and maybe kill the Scribe before it can even put down the Nexus. But instead, he's lost the third base. And 3Crow knows he has to continue to this push. 10 more Hydras on the way, the Mutat Spire on the way as well. It's going to be a ways away before we finish that off. I think all of the front line is gone at this point because they're all up the ramp. There's one Golem in here. And all those Sprites, they are able to deal very minimal damage to the Vassal count. We have a couple more coming over. That looks like Vassals are going to be the reinforcement du jour for 3Crow. And now losing the natural, you're in a little bit of a bigger pickle. Ramen actually doesn't have that much minerals left, and we are even in workers. Iris being focused down, that's obviously never going to happen. Vassals actually have to come over here and deal with the Hydras. More of them are spawning. I'm not sure what the Spire was actually supposed to be for. Was it supposed to be for Mutas? Not 100% sure. The Focus Fire needs to come out with the Hydras, otherwise the Golems are going to run roughshod over this army. And this is very tight, honestly. Like, I actually don't know who's going to win this one. I thought for sure Ramen should have been advantaged in this position, fight underneath the Sprites so that the Vassals don't come in. But no, 3Crow, with no natural, floating 1,000 minerals, is able to make it happen. That is absolutely surprising and stupendous. And, of course, we fast forward at the end because he likes to destroy his enemy structures after the game is over. And that is going to conclude the set. Interesting. I was not expecting 3Crow to be able to take that last game. But yeah, it is down to, you know, recognizing what does Zerg do best. What does Zerg do better than the other races? Well, they produce a lot of units, and they can do so all at once as opposed to, you know, having to respect queues. And part of that is down to managing your worker versus your military. That's the thing that you have to balance at key locations throughout the game, key timings throughout the game, but also especially in the early game. And I think Ramen was able to do that fairly well, but he didn't realize just how powerful his position actually was. And I think that's down to something you're naturally going to get a lot of the times looking back at the replays when you're first picking up a race or first trying them or, you know, really drilling them in that respect. So honestly, doesn't really surprised me that 3Crow is able to snag a couple of matches. He's a lot more experienced as Protoss than Ramen is as Zerg. But I'm eager to see a rematch later on if Ramen decides to stick with trying Zerg or if he just goes back to his trusty Terran. And we'll see if maybe 3Crow can still serve up a respectable end result. GG's, and we'll be back tomorrow for more games.